r/ask Reddit. What is something that people like only because they're blinded by nostalgia? Sometimes I start thinking that gaming was better back in the PS2 era, but then I start thinking that I am probably blinded by nostalgia. I think there's a lot to like about that era. Games more often than not came fully finished out the box and 3D graphics weren't totally abysmal. Like, I wouldn't say it was peak gaming, but it was more consumer friendly in many ways. Ah yes, back when you could put a disc in your console and just play. Poverty. I know nobody likes poverty, but people get nostalgic about it. I haven't experienced it myself, but a lot of people who have romanticize it as well. I felt really stupid when I asked my dad, but was it like we were poor but we were happy? Like we didn't have much but we had each other? And all those other cliches? He straight up said, to paraphrase, no, we were poor and it was rubbish. I miss nothing about it. Being comfortable is better in every way. I think a lot of people who express these sentiments are actually nostalgic for their lost youth, even if those were financially difficult times. I think a lot of people who express these sentiments are actually nostalgic for their lost youth, even if those were financially difficult times. Spot on. I do this a bit. When my wife and I were first married, we had almost nothing. A few sticks of ancient furniture and old blankets for curtains. It's easy to look back and remember the good times because it all worked out and we built a life and income together. But at the time, the looming financial uncertainty really dampened any good times we had. An ex-significant other. To be fair, if you had good memories and moments with them, they're still good memories and moments. Just because you broke up doesn't make everything that happened in that relationship a horrible thing. Although I will admit this depends entirely on how you broke up and what the person was actually like. Yeah, I don't miss my ex at all, but I miss the time we spent together. We're both different people now. Not bad people, just different. And I wouldn't ever go back to her, but I still miss what we used to be. My fiancee's parents both died when she was young, so she put them on a pedestal. Metaphorically, she wasn't old enough to learn that they were flawed people like anyone else. So she compares the memory of her parents against the reality of my parents, who are great, but are just as flawed as anyone else. The memory of her parents can do no wrong. Getting her and her siblings into Scientology had no downsides. Appeasing one sister's rage by getting her birthday presents on every other sibling's birthday didn't encourage further rage and inequality. Having 5 kids when they could barely afford 3 wasn't irresponsible. It was common sense. Because of it, I can't help but think that to truly grow up, you need to see your parents fail in one capacity or another. I know my parents aren't perfect, and that's why I try to do better than they did, rather than comparing everyone else's methods to theirs. There's a community quote about this that I love. The cruelest lesson we ever have to learn as kids is that our parents are just people. We want to see them as gods or demons, because that makes us the hero. But the truth is we all just suck. I would recommend getting your fiancé into therapy before getting married. That sounds like it could cause a lot of problems and resentment down the line. Old cartoons, like He-Man, Thundercats, Transformers and so on. I know everybody loves them, but they're pretty god-awful. They're just toy commercials with flashy effects to trick you into spending your parents' money. If they came out today, people would hate them. Edit to add some thoughts instead of repeating the same thing over and over. I'm not knocking anyone's opinions or feelings on the shows. Frankly, I have a great time watching these. They're just not particularly well made and they weren't supposed to be. As a personal anecdote, after seeing the crazy uproar that happened when Thundercats Raw was announced, I decided to finally check out the original show myself. The first few episodes are genuinely pretty good, but after that, crazy hard nosedive into awfulness. Anyone can enjoy anything they want. Hell, I love these goofy ass shows. Just don't attack anyone who doesn't see them as cinematic art like you do. I watched the 1986 Transformers movie in the theater last week when they had it on for one night only. I was crying with laughter at the absurdity and incongruous nature of everything. Having said that, I enjoyed it more this time than ever before. To be fair, that movie was ducking insane by any standard. It was a kids movie that opened with mass genocide by Orson Welles. The Pokemon movie. I can only imagine what my parents thought when they had to take me and sit through that shit. My mum still brings up having to take me to see that at the cinema. The trauma runs deep. My dad refers to it as his $8 nap. High school. I remember the gang fondly. Whatever. It was 90% boredom and 5% adolescent antagonism. I'm in my 30s and still talk to several of my closest high school friends every day, and many more every couple weeks or months. Reddit has given me to understand we're unusual in that regard. I don't idolize the experience or want to go back, but in large part because of that it's hard to say it was overrated, not good, or doesn't deserve a wry smile for nostalgia here and there. I'm with you, bud. Reddit makes high school seem like it was hell. It was pretty solid time. With some people I have made lifelong connections too. Good times, bad times, they are all there, but man, it was the most free of consequence you will ever be. Edit. Definitely an interesting perspective seeing such a variety of experience. Shows I enjoyed as kids, teens. Very rarely do those shows still hold up when viewed through an adult perspective. Early SpongeBob is fantastic though. I didn't watch it a ton as a kid, but I recently binged the first 3 seasons and it's a lot better than I was expecting. That show still makes me actually laugh out loud. The older ones at least. I haven't seen much of the more recent episodes. I honestly think it's SNL. I don't think SNL was ever great, but it's impossible to know. People say it sucks now, but it used to be amazing. I propose that it has never been great. It's been mediocre good with a few great sketches at best, and the people who say it was amazing back then are blinded because they watched it when they were kids and it's just nostalgia. What makes people think things were so much better back then is that reruns cherry pick the sketches that worked, and best of compilations are all you can really find otherwise. Sure, SNL looks awesome when you're seeing the highlight reel of some of their best performers. It's the same reason why people always say music was better back then is because radio stations have only kept playing the best songs while discarding all the non-hits that nobody cared about when they were new. GoldenEye on N64. I hate to break it to you. It's hot trash if you played it today. I tried to play it again and straight up forgot how to aim. So clunky and frustrating to control. It is. I think we more or less just adapted to the control schemes. I mean, it was the late 90s. If you wanted a video game, you did not have the luxury of just downloading one, and as a result, your choices were fairly limited, especially because you also had hardware limits. What console does you/your friend have? Thomas and the Magic Railroad, do not watch that movie now, OMG, it's bad. On the contrary, the old BBC Thomas episodes are still amazing. Ringo Starr is the best narrator. I say he deserved it, don't you? Cue Henry's depressed face as he slowly bricked up in a tunnel. Riding on a restored carousel with flying horses and a steam organ playing. Holden. Edit. The idiot main character of The Catcher in the Rye. 1950s America. Politicians seem to suffer from this type of nostalgic blindness a lot. It's because people long for their childhood. Many of them remember that time when things were amazing. Most current politicians grew up during that time. We are starting to see a few millennial politicians. So get ready to hear about how the 90s were the best times. Can't wait to see the first president who grew up on N64. In the 80s we missed the 50s 60s. Back to the Future. In the 90s we missed the 70s. That 70s show. In the zeros we missed the 80s. Classic rock made a comeback. Now we're missing the 90s. Remaking re-releasing video games from the 90s. And soon we're going to miss the 10s. It seems to be a cycle that we nostalgically look back at what it was like 20 years ago. Cassette tapes. Are you kidding? The sound quality is garbage and having to fast forward through bad tracks is a huge pain in the ass. Let me introduce you to 8-track tapes. Power Rangers. The funny thing about Power Rangers though is I think people like it in spite of how bad it was, not because of it. It was pretty cheesy. You could tell that even when it was new. But it does have kind of an irresistible charm to it with its young people making a different vibe. Giant monsters and robots. Ninjas. And its catchy heavy metal theme song. Power Rangers is one of those things that either registers with you and affects you positively, or not at all. My brother, for example, is only 5 years younger than me. Definitely in the window of time for enjoying it, and for whatever reason he just doesn't have any remembrance for it at all. Meanwhile I'm rewatching the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie and actually enjoying it, and I'm like, dude, don't you remember this? We watched it all the time, and he's like, no, not really. There are a lot of shows that had bad production values and acting from a long time ago, but there's something about them that transcends it all. Exactly, even as an adult that Power Rangers opening riff is sick AF. Age certainly hasn't changed it. The old Need for Speeds. They all had horrible rubber band eye. The Rice Cars of the Underground series feel super cringy today. The soundtrack however still dope AF. To the window. To the wall. The olden days generally, people forget about a lot of the shit that used to take place. Racism everywhere and accepted. Car safety standards very low. Discrimination against women and many more. And air quality. People died from smog. London has a smog inversion that killed people directly and indirectly in the 50s. https://en.m. Wikipedia. Wiki Great Smog of London also happened in New York and other cities. https://en.m. Wikipedia. Wiki 1966 New York City smog. There was a whole episode about this in The Crown and I was amazed. I had no idea that had happened. Saved by the Bell. It was a stupid, poorly acted show with a scheming little shit written as the protagonist. Plus they aired it during the Saturday morning cartoon block, and it wasn't a goddamn cartoon. Zach Morris is trash. And she was never seen again, cause she probably ducking killed herself. The concept of being a 1950s housewife. I see a lot of this being in vogue in some blog circles. They'll wear the fashion, bake the cookies and wax lyrical about how great life was back then when a woman's place was in the home. In reality life sucked a whole lot more for women back then. No proper birth control, onerous housework with far less conveniences than we have. Being forced to quit work when you married. No real way to leave your husband easily if he turned out to be a jerk either. But all some see is cute petticoats and white sheets drying on the washing line. I just imagine that existence being so bored I'd either turn alcoholic or shoot myself. Especially in the 1950s. There was like 3 TV channels, no phones, not as many attractions to go to. Between 9 AM and 3 PM I'd imagine they basically just gossiped endlessly with other housewives. The band Kiss. They didn't form as a band so much as they were manufactured and marketed by Simmons, Inc. Absolutely, with such products as the Kiss condom and Kiss casket, they can be part of your life whether you're coming or going. Sorry. Stalinism. Unfortunate, but true. There are actual people who think Stalin was a great chap and Soviet Union was a nice place to live. Most likely to be said by people who never had to live in Soviet Union. I had a rare opportunity to see it twice myself as a Western tourist. Oh man, it was something else, I tell you. And I saw only the best what the country had to offer. Both my parents grew up in the Soviet Union, and both would agree with you. Many of the people who romanticize it just see that it was a socialist nation, and so they like it. They ignore the horrible living standards, the government corruption, and the food shortages. Most older video games. Everyone remembers certain things they loved about specific video games from their childhood and assume that they will get that same feeling if they were to experience it again as an adult. I can't lie, I have had this exact scenario happen dozens of times, but I am always left feeling the same after I get a second shot with said games. Those games laid the foundation for hundreds of games since then, all of which have improved on every possible aspect of the very things that made those games good to the younger version of me. So much so, in fact, that it now makes the original game pale in comparison to everything I've experienced since. The sad truth is that those games were amazing when first experienced and they created a love for video games that will probably never die. But they are always going to be the equivalent of a baby toy you played with as a child. They were fun and formative, but will never be able to be experienced the same way and need to remain in the past where they belong. Most games, of course. There are a few that still hold up. SMB3 is still awesome. Dr. Mario is playable as ever. Double Dash is still the best Mario Kart in the series. Just like movies, there are a few that hold up really well even if there are a lot of others that fade with time. The 50s. Or maybe they just really liked being surrounded by lead, asbestos, and the constant threat of nuclear hellfire. I wasn't there, but I think the 50s were pretty amazing for a lot of people because what came before was so unrelentingly terrible. As modern people, I don't think we can appreciate just how much the standard of living rose. I sometimes feel that is what drives a lot of the nostalgia for the 50s. Also, it's very economically convenient, if you're in the US, to have your competition bombed into rubble. Modern movie reboots, note, not remakes. There's a difference. Remakes are 99% of the time dog shit, but people like reboots because it evokes nostalgia for something they loved when they were younger. It usually involves some kind of passing of the torch with the original characters, some modern version of the old music, and people just eat that shit up because it's like their childhood fantasies to have met these characters and go on adventures with them. Circus Peanuts, the orange marshmallow ones. I will be the first to admit that I love these and they remind of my childhood, and that unless you grew up eating them, they are absolutely disgusting. No one is ever going to pick up a circus peanut in their 30s for the first time and say, yum, give me another. Something about orange colored, peanut shaped, banana flavored marshmallows gets me. George W. Bush. Is that nostalgia, or realization that what we thought was rock bottom wasn't even halfway down? George Bush was legitimately bad. We legalized torture. Abu Ghraib happened. We started 2 wars in the Middle East we still can't extricate ourselves from. One of them was started on false pretenses, and his administration outed a CIA agent when her husband painted some of the evidence in a bad light. Like George Bush 2 was a bottom 3rd president, easy. One of the worst. Trump is just like bottom 3. The first Pokemon game. There's multiple ways to softlock the game. Unfair/broken moves, and OP types. Fire Red and Leaf Green were much better games. I could never go back to Gen 1 or 2. I have replayed the Gen 1 games multiple times and always have a blast. It's also much more fun when I can speed the emulator up and cruise through leveling. But maybe the nostalgia is just that strong for me, and soft locking that game requires either being extremely unlucky or really trying. Sears. I'm sitting in the waiting room in the local Sears Auto Center because the fleet management company sent me there for a minor repair and oil change on my work truck. That service is appallingly bad. The only other customers are super old, apparently loyal to this obsolete, lame-ass business because of nostalgia or ignorance that there's 100 better places you can easily find online. Today, opened late, still haven't unlocked the front door, so customers are traipsing into the litter-strewn shop and in the side employees only door. The service writer is wearing saggy gangster shorts and a t-shirt and no name tag. The phone is ringing constantly, unanswered. The showroom is barely stocked. There's a windshield wiper display that has a huge pile of unsorted wiper blades on the floor all around it, and on and on. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. I was obsessed with it as a kid. I even had the beach towel. I found the DVD a couple years ago and was psyched to watch it again. I don't think I made it past the first scene before shutting it off and realizing what a weird child I was. The DDR. Dance Dance Revolution. Deutsche Demokratische Republik. Old East Germany. Classic rock radio. Enough already. The same 500 songs actually weren't that good originally. They aren't any better now. Are you saying that you don't like hearing The Boys Are Back in Town 10 times a day? Stop listening to a station run by Clear Channel iHeartRadio. Find an independent station in your area. A lot of the discontinued snacks that people, including me, say they miss weren't actually that good. I can only think of 2 food products that have been discontinued that I actually would have on a semi-regular basis. Pepsi Holiday Spice and Nacho Cheese Corn Nuts. Oh, and the Lime Skittle in the original packs. But Lime Skittles still exist in other packs, so that doesn't really count. Sure, those Orbitz drinks with the little tapioca balls in them were cool, and as a kid I loved them. But if I could have them now, would I? No, probably not. They would likely taste way too sweet and the little balls were kind of slimy. Discontinued things are usually discontinued because they are not popular and we didn't use them when they did exist. Stranger Things. Must admit if the show didn't have that 80s Goonies Ghostbusters feel I wouldn't have watched it. I don't have 80s nostalgia. I was 3 when they ended, but I really liked Stranger Things. Vanilla WoW. The military. No war will ever be as noble and justified as World War II. Since then we just seem to enjoy screwing with countries, topple their leaders, bomb some civilians, occupy worthless land, and pretend to be heroes defending America from what, open bracket, defending Kuwait was justified, but not terribly heroic, more like kicking puppies. Star Wars 1977. Loved it when I was a kid. Just watched it again a couple of weeks ago and boy, can you see the seams. You can really tell Alec Guinness was the only person on that set who knew what he was doing. Superman movies. He seemed to be a dong. Kingdom Hearts. It had an interesting idea but after going back and playing them again, what a stupid cringy story. For having so many Disney characters it's completely void of humor or charm. Unmodded Morrowind. Space Jam. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content bruh. It's free and that's a great price.